about that. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us with our Talk With series. And today it's my pleasure to do the talk with Debra Katz. And she's going to be discussing how to bypass self-judging pitfalls in ARV and other side projects using photo sets. And this is really going to be very interesting because for many years, Debra really did herself and really advocated independent judging. So it'll be very interesting to see what she's come up with. Now, Debra is a founder of the International School of Clairvoyance. She has taught thousands of students how to access their various psychic abilities through her workshops, private training, books, and readings. She is a former federal probation officer, filmmaker, former TV show host, and holds a master's degree in social work and a BA in psychology. She has 3 books out: Extraordinary Psychic, You Are Psychic, and I love the title of this one, Freeing the Genie Within. So with that, Debra, let me turn this over to you. So I'm going to stop my share. And can you now share your screen, or do I have to make you a host, or what?
I think you have to invite me to be a host.
Okay, so I think what I do know what I have to do. I'll make you a host, and then you'll have control. Still new at this, but there you are.
And then probably people can just turn off their own cameras.
Yeah,
Fun to see you, and
I'll do that.
I'm very happy to see Lori here. Hi, Lori. Turn it off. If you go next to your name, there should be a little icon that you can click on, the drop-down menu.
Right, and I just hid myself. Okay, and you should now be able to do a share because I made you a host, Debra.
Okay, great. Oh, that's good. Let's see.
Okay, yep, we see your screen.
I didn't have a chance to clear it off, but we'll get started. And I'm so thrilled to see so many of my friends here and some new names and probably people that I know but just don't quite recognize right now. Let's see, I just want to go back to the panel, and I would love to see a show of hands. Now, you guys may not know where the hand feature is, but if you look at your little control panel with your name, there should be a little hand next to your name that says raise hand. And I would love to see a show of hands of very new to ARV. So if you're brand new to ARV, Associative Remote Viewing, and you don't really know what it is, just raise your hand because I just want to get an idea of the amount of experience that we have in the room right now. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to go in depth for the brand new people, but even if you're still a little bit foggy on the process, I think what we cover today is really going to help fill in some blanks. And then if you get additional instruction from Marty or some of the other guys that are helping out, or ladies with the Applied Precognition Project, I think between what we're doing here and getting some other basic instruction, you're going to be really well set. Associative remote viewing is definitely a complex process and protocol. Well, once you get it figured out, it's not so much, but it can take some time. So I want to say thank you again for Marty being here. And I see just, thank you for raising your hands, you guys. I see just a couple people that are newer. Well, I'll really be speaking to the more experienced people in the group, and assuming that most of you have a basic understanding of these topics. So just let me pull up my PowerPoint here. Okay, and let's see if I can go from my first slide. Okay, so can you guys still see me on video? I assume you can, even though I can't see myself here.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I won't do anything embarrassing then while the camera's on. Good to know. I don't usually teach classes with the camera on, so hopefully that won't be distracting. But so you should see my PowerPoint. And basically, the thing that I think is important to share for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting is I have been involved with associative remote viewing for many years now, thanks to Marty. He was the one to introduce me to the subject, and I've been a part of the Applied Precognition Project for many years. I was their co-webmaster along with Michelle Bolgatz, who Michelle is supposed to be joining us too, because she's going to speak a little bit to one part of the presentation today. So I've been just done probably, well, hundreds for sure, associative remote viewing projects. And as a viewer, and first and foremost, I want you to know that I'm speaking as a fellow remote viewer, and that is my main focus today. Now, there's going to be, I also want to speak to not just being a viewer, but also how to set up associative remote viewing files and other kinds of parapsychology files. So some of what I'm going to speak to is also going to be very relevant to those that are both managers and those that are judges in sessions too. But first and foremost, we'll be focusing on what can you as a remote viewer do to take control of your session. And before I go on, I am hearing some background noise, and maybe we can just take a look at where that might be coming from. Okay, well, let me just see here. Okay, if everyone could mute themselves if you're not talking right now. And the nice thing about this system is it'll let you unmute yourself. So when it is time to ask questions or speak up, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself. But if everyone could find the mute button next to your own name, or you know what, let me do this for you. Okay, I think that's better. All right, so yes, just a little bit more about myself. So the perspective I'm going to be coming from will be from as someone who's done a lot of remote viewing trials. As a remote viewer, I've also been managing lots of projects over the years. I've been a subject in a lot of associative remote viewing projects and other projects that involve judging sets. And some people might say, well, you know, are you coming over to the dark side? Because as Marty indicated, he knows that I've been somewhat of an opponent to self-judging after seeing how often for so many years when there was self-judging involved, which is basically the act of looking at which photo you may have been describing as your feedback photo, selecting the best choice, giving it scores, and then making a prediction off of them. And then you eventually get to see what the photo actually was. But in that process, many times we end up accidentally doing a very good job describing the wrong photo. Now, the first reaction of most viewers, and especially new ones who are just learning, can I be psychic at all? Can I even do this? Oftentimes our first reaction is, wow, this is super cool. I described something, like I don't really care that it wasn't right because I was clearly being psychic here. And that's really important to know. We have to get that awareness for ourselves. Yes, I can really do this. And so, you know, we're just so happy to be able to describe anything. But as those of you know who've been in this for a while, that doesn't really help the project overall. In fact, it can completely lead to the failure of the project. And you know, today I'm going to use some words that typically we try to stay away from, and I'm going to do that on purpose. So these may be emotionally inciting words or upsetting words, like the word like failure, or not doing well, or ruining the project, or losing money. Like, these are negative words that I'm sure even some of you, probably Marty, may be sitting there like, oh gosh, you know, we want to stay away from those words. But what I want to do is take those words and put them in the place where we're getting off track when we self-judge. So just backtracking a little bit. So again, you might be like, well, why are we even talking about self-judging then? Because you already said you don't really like it. Well, Marty has been a big advocate of don't avoid it, just learn how to overcome it. And I was, while I like that idea of learning how to overcome anything, I've also seen it like, well, there's ways we could set things up that just make the whole process easier. However, as we'll see in a little later today, when I talk about a project that Michelle Bolgetz and I did about predicting the presidential election, you'll see that there's still a problem because we didn't use self-judging. We used independent judging with her and I as the researchers judging, not the remote viewers. And we almost had unanimously really good sessions. Almost completely every session was towards the wrong photo in the set. And that was not about self-judging, it was about having independent judges. So the viewers never even saw the photos in that case. And yet their attention, their consciousness still seemed to go to the wrong place. So my goal today in understanding that sometimes we just don't have a choice. If we want to be, sure, you can be of the mindset, I will never self-judge, or I will never do this or that. So if I get invited for any projects, I'm just going to avoid them. But what I've learned is that some of these projects where the researchers or Associative Remote Viewing project managers just say, you know what, we have to use self-judging because that's the only feasible thing we can do. We don't have millions of dollars for a budget, even we don't have any money for a budget. And so it takes too much time for independent judges. And there are some values of self-judging. There's actually a lot because the remote viewer may not have effectively put everything down on the paper, but what your internal experiences were and how it feelings, smells, certain things that cannot be just a overall ambiance of a sense that you might not communicate on paper to a judge who has all their own ideas and pictures about what they're looking at, which may be very different from yours. So you may actually be a great advocate for yourself if you could get past describing and essentially remote viewing the wrong photo in the set. And what I'm going to put out here today is the idea that our judging sets are neither of the photos or no matter how many photos, whether it's 2 in the set or 10 in the set, none of them are the same as the feedback photo. It's not that one of them are the feedback photo. First and foremost, you have to get that none of them are. Even though, so this is a game you have to play with yourself, even though there will be one that matches it. But if my whole point today is going to be about separating things in time and space. And so one other thing that I've recently been on some projects where I had some pretty good results doing this one technique. So if nothing else today, what I want to share with you guys is this particular approach of what you can do when you're remote viewing. And I just want to say, because I know there's plenty of people here that have had training from different remote viewing instructors, and they follow, so some have had no training, or some have listened to audio courses, some have trained with Lynn Buchanan, Lori Williams, Paul Smith, TDS, Courtney Brown, and Scientific Remote Viewing, the Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild. There's all sorts of different approaches, and a lot of people, when they do associative remote viewing, they're just kind of tuning in, that they have all this knowledge, but they're not really following the same structure or format they would do with a more in-depth session. So it doesn't matter what you've learned, you can completely do your remote viewing sessions however you do them all the time. What I'm going to be introducing is just what you focus on at the very start of your session and how to proceed as part of the overall protocol of what I've found successful. And then I also want to share a little bit subject of displacement, which I thought was an absolutely brilliant idea to task those of us who have been very interested in this subject with a target that we had no idea what the target was, but the target question was, why is displacement happening? And so there's a little bit more to it, but that was the gist of it, at least in a particular instance where viewers had done a very good job describing the wrong photo. And I spent many, many hours on that session and got some awarenesses that I've also integrated into this overall philosophy. The other thing I'll say before we really jump into things is that even though I'm saying this is kind of a new approach, I've talked about this in the past. I've talked about it a little bit in another webinar and a little bit at a conference, at one of the app conferences. But I feel like I've solidified this in putting it into practice and having some good results. I'm going through a PhD program right now at the University of West Georgia in psychology. And while unfortunately they don't know a whole lot about remote viewing or anything related to psychic stuff there. My dissertation chair does know quite a bit, Dr. Christine Simmons Moore. So we're working on some projects together. But basically, they don't know too much about this stuff, but they are able to, one of the things they've really helped me with is to refine some of the ways I think about certain psychological concepts. And some of these I'm also going to bring in to the discussion today. So enough of that very long introduction here. So, okay, let me just see, I've lost track of my slides a little bit. So there's parapsychology experiments that they're not associative remote viewing, but the gold standard in all this research when it comes to having participants do some kind of psychic task is the gold standard of analysis is to do what I call a simple matching task. We have a set of photos, which photo were they viewing? And if we can say which photo it was and we pick the right one, we can likely say that there was some psychic proficiency involved. And then you count how many hits and misses. So this is overall, whatever you're doing here, this will help you for future projects as well. And what we're talking about here, a lot of researchers are not really even thinking about. Like they've heard, yeah, self-judging or judging can be a phase of a project where some trouble can happen, but they're not nearly as concerned about this as we are as viewers who witness this all the time. Okay, so I'm just going to skip over to now you'll see I have these anchors on every slide, and what I'm calling the technique that, today we're going to do a remote viewing session here in just a few minutes, and what I call this process is anchoring, and I'm going to have you guys anchor, and then we'll talk a little bit more so we actually have some noise and distractors in between the feedback, and then I'll show you the feedback. So I'll show you how this process works. And moving right along here, is Michelle Bulgatz here? Let me just see. Can't really read with my contacts in. And so does anyone see Michelle here? Let me unmute Marty. Nope.
Okay, I don't see her name. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's
Debra.
fine.
And do you want to make your presentation thing full screen?
Yes.
Leave it that way, yeah. Okay.
Oh.
It's not full screen.
Oh, it's not? Okay, let me go back to that.
I do not see Michelle.
That's fine. I'll just...
You can do it, I'm sure. Okay, I'll mute myself and yeah.
Okay. And hopefully, does that look okay? All right. Okay, so I wanted to share this because this is not just about what happens at judging, but it's also about what happens at predicting time. So within the ARV protocol, we have some different steps, right? We have the step of when you're viewing, the step of when you or someone else is judging the photos, and then there's the step of when a prediction is being made, and sometimes there's wagering involved. In this case, we're doing in a minute what happened. So we were using a double-blind associative remote viewing protocol, and this was the very last one. So we've done 2 presidential elections so far. We did this one, and we did the one with Obama and Romney a while ago. But this one, we did it with a lot more viewers. I think we had 42 remote viewers. Now here is just, we had one viewer who did a great job describing the correct feedback photo. He had literally nothing to the, he had like a 0 score as far as his session going, matching the other photos in the set. And we had a set of 4 different photos. So we had one photo that represented or was associated with Hillary Clinton, another photo that was associated with Trump, which you can see the photo right here. A little ironic that it happened to just, these were randomly selected, but it's a little funny now seeing a bunch of broken, it's a collage that hangs from the ceiling, a light fixture of broken plates and cups. So that's a little ironic. But anyway, so this was attached to Trump's photo, and then we had, or to Trump, and then there was a photo attached to an independent candidate, and then we had a photo attached to candidates that could never happen at all as our control, which that was supposed to be if Michelle and I won as president. So we were pretty sure that wasn't going to happen. So that was our control. So we knew if anybody described that they definitely had to be off, because that wasn't an option that was going to happen. Well, anyway, there were about 2 fairly, this was the strongest session to the right photo out of 42 people. And you can see here, he did a great job. He said biggest gestalts were plates, I think that's supposed to say clanging, but moving together over each other, saw something spinning, teacup ride-like, plus the lights, metal armature. So it didn't feel so solid. Biggest gestalts were plates clamping, moving together over each other. So this was, he actually named aspects of it, lights, cups, plates, the overall sense of it. You can see a nice little sketch. It's a very simple sketch, which oftentimes in ARV, that's all you need, lights upward popping. This was a great session, obviously. We gave him, I think, a 6.5 on it, just because he maybe had a few words, and this is on a SRI scale of 0 to 7. So I think he had a few other words that weren't quite correct, but again, they didn't match the other photos. But because of this, we gave him almost a perfect score. And this is what we're really looking for. We're looking for a great session like this. The weird thing was that all the other viewers had, some of them had equally great sessions, but for the wrong photos. So why did this happen? Well, one of the things that happened is that because so many people's sessions were pointing towards the picture that was matched with Hillary's, and there were some also towards the independent candidate, but more so towards Hillary's. So because of that, and also what I believe was some personal biases that at least I had as a researcher, we made a prediction and we issued the prediction onto Facebook. And that prediction was there for about 48 hours. And then we decided to take it down. And then later on, we found out what the actual outcome was, again, that this was the feedback photo. Now, I'm showing you the feedback photo for one reason, because we're talking about psychology in many ways here today in this presentation. And so I want to show you that John Vivanco did a very good job describing the right photo. Ironically, John told us later when he found out this was associative remote viewing, because he didn't know that's what kind of project it was. And when he found out, he said, oh, if I had known that, I wouldn't have done this, because I've had so many times where I described the wrong photo, I pretty much gave up on it. So that was his response, ironically. But I want to show you that we need to reward the people that are actually describing the right photo. And the people that are doing a good job describing the wrong photo, we need to even take away those words, doing a good job describing the wrong photo. I say that, one, because I want to encourage people in their psychic abilities, but on the other hand, if we're not describing the right thing, we're kind of screwing things up. And so we need to be very diligent about what we're doing. So just going back to the wrong exposure to the wrong prediction, what happened was some of our viewers saw the wrong prediction because it was up for a couple days on this Facebook remote viewing page, a couple different sites. But then some of the people did not see that, and they were not exposed to the wrong prediction. So this enabled us to do a little analysis, and our numbers weren't big enough to make any definitive statement, but it did seem that out of the 12 viewers who reported having been exposed to the prediction, 8 of their sessions pointed strongly to the photo associated with Clinton. 5 of these strongly, 3 pointed both to Clinton and to the third party option. And then 1 pointed to Trump and 1 pointed to Debra and Michelle as president. So we suspect that it's very possible that their consciousness may have been led over to the prediction phase and all of that, the photo attached to the prediction, even though they never saw the photo itself. So what I'm talking about here is not simply that it's not that we showed the photo that was associated with Clinton. It's not that we showed them this, but what we're suggesting is that their consciousness went to that photo that was attached to the prediction. So essentially I just wanted to show you this to say that what happens at the prediction phase is important as well. Now I want to say a lot more about this, but at this point I'd like to take a little break before I go deeper into the whole theory, because I want to give you a chance to do a remote viewing session, and you're only going to have 2 minutes to do this, and then we're just going to put it aside and talk and have a little time in between. And then at the end of the webinar today, I will show you the feedback. And so let's get set up for that, because I'm going to demonstrate and tell you what to do now that is part of my whole suggestion. So essentially, I want everyone right now to get out a piece of paper and get a pen, and you're only going to have, we'll say you have 3 minutes for this. And what I'm going to do is get out my little harmonica here that I just bought. It's a blues harmonica. And I'm not going to give you a whole concert performance, because then you guys would all run away and hang up the phone really fast. But when we're ready in just a minute or two, I'll play my tone on my harmonica. And then the tone that I play, I'm going to play the same tone right before you get your feedback photo. So what I'm going to do here, and what the whole premise is of the point of the talk today, is that we have to find a way to raise the vibrational numinance or numinosity, intensity of the feedback photo, as opposed to anything else that is happening in the process. Now, this is not a new concept, and this harkens back to the time when Marty had introduced several years ago the concept of a beacon, which a beacon was an idea like where you could take an object at the time you remote view, and then an object that you use the same object when you are going to get your feedback photo, and so you have that same object with you, and that serves as a beacon. I still like that idea, but this is really amping it up, building on that, and it's getting more not just into adding something. The harmonica tone is going to add something, but then I'm also going to show you how to direct your attention. So I'll play this again right before you start, and then I will play this when you get your feedback photo. The other thing we're going to do is we have to find a way to make the feedback photo different from the judging set. And so what I'm going to do is I will print out the feedback photo. So your judging set you'll see on the computer screen, and you'll see it sooner because we have to judge in order to issue a prediction. And again, we're not going to do ARV as far as like an event, but it's just there's a single target, but we're going to judge. I want you to be able to choose which photo is closest to the feedback photo. So to distinguish between the judging set and the feedback photo, we're going to do a couple things. So one will be playing this tone. The other thing is going to be that I will print it out. I've already got it printed out, and I can hold it up and show it to you, but it may even be stronger if I'll walk my computer over to my printer, which unfortunately I didn't clean my room over in that spot, but that's okay, doesn't matter. I'll carry you with me over to the printer when it's time to print out the feedback photo, and then I'll show you the feedback photo. And what I do myself as a viewer when I'm going through this process, I usually make the plan of what I'll do ahead of time. So I have this all worked out, like, okay, when I get my feedback photo, ideally I'm going to know even the day or even the time, but a lot of times don't know it. The project manager just can't give it yet. That's okay, but I know this is me as a remote viewer taking control of my session. Doesn't matter when they send me, even though what they're doing definitely can facilitate the process or hurt the process, but what is in my control? I know that I can do whatever I want with that feedback photo. So I'm going to print it out. I'm going to hang it on my wall. I may frame it. I can put it anywhere I want. I could put it under my pillow. And this, I know some of you already do processes like this, like the idea where you get your feedback photo and then you sketch it, like you sketch it how looking at it with your eyes open, and that can help as well. So this is building on really additional ideas of what to do with your feedback. But the thing is that makes it even a little different than like drawing it which I think is a fantastic idea, to draw your feedback photo with your eyes looking at it when you're done. But what I'm talking about here is creating a separation in space. So it's a spatial separation that is very different and very unique to what the judging photos are. And we're creating it by actually making use of this new space, the space being, where's the printer? It's coming out of the printer. I have a spot where I hang my sessions up. Now, this requires a little bit of planning, because if I haven't been paying attention or in my office, I might have an old photo up in the spot I like to hang up my feedback photos, and that can screw things up. So I have to make sure that, if I say I'm going to hang it on my wall, or I'm going to put it under my pillow, or put it somewhere in a specific place, I have to be really careful that I'm diligent to do that in the end. So today I'm going to print it out for you, and then I'll show it to you. And you'll see that we're not doing this with the judging photos. The judging photos are just going to be on your screen. And I'll show you, after we do this, a couple other things you can do, like project managers, that you can do for your remote viewers to decrease the level of excitement with the judging photos. So let's, I think that is everything I wanted to share right now about that process. So let's, what you're going to need to do though, so let's kind of enter into more of a remote viewing space now. I'm sure, so hopefully none of you have gotten started, because your remote viewing instructors will all tell you it's not time to get started until it's time to get started. And so now, why don't you write your names on your paper where you usually do, and most of you probably right-hand side. At the top, write your name and the date. And then before you do anything, even before you write the target number, or just while you might decide to write the target number a couple times, but either right before you write the target number or when you do, I want you to relax, and I want you to find a place within yourself where you're connecting with that feedback photo. That is, so you're going to essentially bring your consciousness to either the moment where you see the feedback photo coming out of my printer, because in this case, you know, it'll come out of my printer, or I'll be holding up the feedback photo and it'll be right after I make this tone. So it's not just that you're going to hear the tone, but right now in time and space, I want you to visualize, project yourself to the future point and visualize it, either where you're seeing the paper come out of the printer and it's just laying there, and then I flip it over and I show it to you. And if you want to even see a line of energy, like going from a part of you, it could be from your third eye or from your heart or wherever it feels, but just imagine that there's waves of energy going from you yourself involved. This, it wouldn't be me showing something, which I can create another level of distractor. I'm aware of that, but just for the sake of training, we're doing it this way. But just know I'm just acting as your own self. So this would be your own self that you'd be projecting yourself to. But it's first, you're going to go in time and space to the physical place where you're going to see the feedback photo and get anchored into that. And then I'll just tell you one more thing, and then I'll be quiet and let you do this. So once you do that, then it's up to you to do whatever technique you like. The photo, you can, at that point, if you like to go to the actual location or you like to interact with your target, you just proceed however you normally do. You're just making sure you get set up with this in space and time, and the time will be what we'll call, like, you know, the end of our webinar. Okay, I'm going to play this one more time, and then you get just a couple minutes to do your session. just take about 1 more minute. All right, so I know that that was super fast. And Marty, I just want to make sure, can you hear me and see my screen and everything?
Yes, yes, you're fine. All I see now are the icons, and I see Debra Katz's thing
Okay.
there. But yes, and we're hearing you fine as well.
Okay, great. So a few words. That was super fast. And also because this, this presentation is about distractions, I haven't cared about the distractions. Anyone who has been remote viewing for any length of time can say, oh my gosh, well, we've got her video going. We've got this very distracting PowerPoint presentation here. She's going back and forth on her computer with things. There's some, we could hear a cat in the background. We can hear this and that. These are terrible conditions to be remote viewing under. And normally I would be very, very concerned about all of these and not have any of this stuff going on. But because I'm just trying to demonstrate this really quickly, and also this is about, life is filled with so many distractions. And so my point is not to say we shouldn't do what we can when it comes to minimizing those distractions and doing things in as quiet, simple as possible. That anyone who knows me knows I'm a strong advocate of all of that. But my point here is that sometimes life is messy and the way that things are set up are not ideal. And that's what we're learning how to work against right now. So I want to just pull up the judging photos and let me just see where they are. Okay, and one moment here. Okay, so here are, calling this a judging set. And now even, I'm going to show those to you in a minute, but I want you to, even before I haven't showed them. Okay, good. I didn't realize I hadn't resumed my share yet. Okay, before I show you the photos, I want you to just stop right now, close your eyes, and tune into yourself. And I want you to ask yourself, how am I feeling about seeing the judging photos? Like, what feelings or thoughts are coming right before we show those? And I'd like to just hear from, let me see if I can get my control panel up. Ooh, and hang on just a second. I just noticed my battery is low. Marty, could you unmute people? And I'll be right back. I'm so sorry. I don't want to lose you, so I'm just getting my computer cord.
I think people have to unmute themselves.
Okay.
Yeah. Under the participants at the bottom, you can unmute yourselves. Okay. So I can't unmute everybody, but.
Okay. So I would love to hear from a few of you before I show you the photos. What emotions are you feeling? Is anyone like feelings of anticipation, or just tell me some of your feelings right now as you know you're about to see a judging set and judge your session. Anyone want to speak up? And how about, I can also call on you if you're.
Oh, this is Lori. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
I have happy anticipation.
Okay, and tell us about that. Why do you, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I did a session and I, like to see what happens, and I don't know, even if, so I don't have any worry about, oh no, maybe I didn't do it. I just like to judge.
Okay, and do you feel like, well, let's hear from a few other people. Who else would like to share? Evelyn, how about you? Or who, just someone speak up.
This is Bob. I had a feeling of regret. I suddenly saw something in my mind that was slightly different orientation than when I was remote viewing it.
Well, and when you say a little bit more about that.
Well, there was a particular object that I saw that I drew on my paper. And then when you asked me to go back and, look at my feelings, I suddenly had a little bit of panic, little regret, like, oh, I didn't draw this quite the way that I feel I'm seeing it now.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. And who else?
Debra, I don't know if you can hear me. My name's JJ. Do you hear anything? Hi. I initially felt pretty neutral when we were talking about getting ready for it. I still feel pretty neutral. And yet there's an excitement because I've always wanted to be a self-judge, thinking that, oh, I should know, I should have a better understanding of what I'm going to see than anybody else. And also having then failed miserably on a number of occasions, there's an excitement and also, I don't know, the fear that, oh, what if I'm not really and would this work with 5 targets? What if I'm not as good at this as I would like to think?
Okay, great. And do you feel like you'll know some of that once you see the judging set?
I think, since I'm guessing this is only going to be a binary, that it'll still be pretty clear which it was. I think that'll go away, or at least that's my hope. I like the idea of anchoring it, and I felt really connected to the anchor, so we'll see.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to share what they're feeling as in advance of seeing the judging photos very soon?
Sure, I'll be brave. This is Lila.
Hi there.
Hi, and I get nervous. I have nervous anticipation because I don't necessarily see things with my mind. I feel things, and they just come up, and then I write them down. And then I'm terrible at drawing, so quite often I'll have a figure in my head, and I just can't get it from my head to my hand and onto the paper. So that's very frustrating.
Okay, so you have a lot of different feelings, and some of those are just about, not just, but they're about remote viewing and everything you're going through, and then some may be about the anticipation of seeing the feedback photos themselves. So a lot going on there, and what you're expressing is very, very normal, and I think anyone who's been doing remote viewing would say the same things. There's a lot that we're feeling or is just kind of coming that we're not seeing, and therefore we don't have all that much confidence about. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. So here's the thing. What I want to really highlight right now is that a lot of emotion is happening, and there's a lot, and let me ask you this: how many of you feel like you have the idea, well, at least I'm going to get some sense of what the target was by seeing the judging set. If you're just kind of feeling that right now, like, well, at least I'll, have some idea. Just raise your hand if you're feeling that. If you're feeling just any kind of like your excitement level is up a little bit, just raise your hand, like from what it was maybe when we started even the webinar today. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of hands going up. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the photos, and gosh, you guys are so wonderful, and okay, I'll just show this. I'll show you this set of photos I have prepared. Okay, so we've got these two judging photos here. These are a little bit unusual for photos that usually most of the judges involved with the applied precognition project, they're going to use some different kinds of photos, but here's a couple. So just compare your session to these and have a sense of which one. Can you tell which one? Do either of these match in any ways? Because that's what we're asking. We're not asking which one was the feedback photo, because the feedback photo is, these are not the feedback photo, these are the judging sets. So we want to just ask, do you see any similarities or differences between this and your session? And then in the chat box, why don't you just put, if you feel like, if you guys know, if you're familiar with CR scores 0 to 7, why don't you just put in your score that you would give yourself? If you're not familiar with that type of scoring, then why don't you just say, like, if there's one that you're sure about, or when I say sure about, let me cancel that language. Instead, let me just say, if you feel like you have a strong match for either one, just indicate that in whatever way you want to in the chat box. And it looks like some people found their annotation button there. So let's just move to the chat box, see what people are putting in there. Bob wrote no match. I'm seeing some no matches. A few people are saying the picture on the right. Someone has an attraction to the one on the left. Okay, thank you for your honesty there. And okay, so great. We'll continue to look at those. So some people are getting the right or the left. Okay, so as you're looking at this, you're probably having more emotions, more thoughts, and look what's happening. You're really, you are required to focus quite a bit in order to compare your session to what's going on here. And unfortunately with self-judging, there's no way around that, right? Like you do need to pay attention to each and be focusing just in order to get the, to tell how much it matches or not. Notice I'm trying to use language, and it's not easy, but I'm trying to use language that says, is there, does it match? Does it look like one or the other? I don't want to say which one is it, which one is the target, because the judging set is never the target. If we were sitting together in physical space, I could have two pieces of paper that are both the judging photos, and then I could have a third paper that is the feedback photo. And even though the third paper may look just like one of the second papers, it still is three different things. And it's very important to be separating that out in your mind. Okay, now is there anyone here who just thought they did so fantastic towards one or the other? If you just are like really impressed with yourself, just type that in. And let me say, if I haven't already emphasized this, I've had so many times where I described the wrong one. So the only reason why I can ethically kind of feel okay with even this whole presentation is knowing like, okay, this is how it is. Sometimes we, describe what we want to describe and sometimes we don't. Here's the thing. I just tricked you guys. Neither of these photos is what the feedback photo is. So these are, so I hate being, I hate tricking people, especially since you're all so nice, but neither of these will look anything like your feedback photo, at least as far as I could tell. So I just did this as a demonstration that that's what I want you guys to be thinking of when it's self-judging time is exactly this, that it could even be that neither of them are it, because neither of them are it. So again, this is a paradox because most of the time, yes, one is going to resemble the other one. And we have to separate in our minds because you might be like, oh, well, this is identical to this feedback photo. No, you have to tell yourself they're different entities. And if you just remind yourself, hey, like it could be neither of them, then you start divorcing yourself in your mind, in your consciousness from them. Now I want to go, so you haven't seen your feedback photo yet, and that's coming later. And these judging photos are just 2 pictures I came up with, and that's it. I want to go back to my PowerPoint presentation here, if I can find it. And does anyone have any questions about and if you can, I'm hearing a little bit of staticky noise, so maybe what I'll do is mute everyone and then we'll talk in a little bit. I think I'll do that. Okay. And then you guys could put your hands down unless you do have questions, and then I'll make sure I get to your questions when we're a little bit further along here. And Marty, can you just tell me how long we have for this webinar today?
Typically, the whole webinars go about 2 hours, hour and a half to 2 hours.
Okay.
And yeah, so we have time. That's one of the nice things about doing it this way. Time is not an issue. Okay, great. So I'm just going to see if I can, I'm losing my screen here. Okay. Okay, from current slide. Okay, so we looked at the judging set, which was not, either of those were the feedback photo. Okay, so you guys felt excited, maybe you felt a little impatient, you were feeling anticipation. So this is a model that I've come up with of what very well may have happened for a few of you. If those of you that did feel like you had a pretty good match to one of them, what that means is that you simply, your attention did not go far enough. So what we have here, and I'll see if I can make it a little bigger. Maybe I can't. Hopefully you guys can read these. It's a little small. But so we've got the remote viewing. The first little circle is the remote viewing phase. And I don't know if you could see it. I looked up, Googled remote viewer and got a picture of Dick Algier, who used to be with the Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild and is a fantastic viewer. So I hope he won't mind. I just grabbed his photo there. He doesn't, as far as I know, do a lot of ARV, but he's an excellent viewer. So we've got that going on. And then this is a model of, let's say, what just happened for some of you. Not all of you, but some of you. So we have the judging phase. I put really big here. And then I want to talk just a little bit about that, because look at, I also have these waves coming out. And this is what, when I talked earlier about how those project managers gave a few viewers, including myself, the task to describe
a situation where displacement had occurred, and we were initially blind to the target, so we didn't know that they were tasking us to get more insight into how does displacement happen. And through my whole session, where I did a few sessions that probably all together were like 5 hours long, and I was constantly getting the sense of vibrations. It was like waves. It seemed like sound waves, but not exactly sound waves. And over again, it was all about vibrations. And I was really racking my brain for a long time to understand, what is it? What do these vibrations mean? What are they? And then it occurred to me, it's not that they are something, it's that they are there, and they're coming from where people's focus, from where their emotion is, from where their intention is. And many times in associative remote viewing trials, there is a breakdown. So I created this slide to try to represent the visual depiction of a breakdown. So you see the energy waves or vibrations coming from the wrong place. And so when the viewer goes, this is really a retrocausal model, because it's about the viewer projecting themselves into the future, but then what's happening in the future, the waves are emanating back, and it's having an impact on where their attention is, even at the time they do the remote viewing session. And so here there's so much excitement around the judging phase. You guys, many of you have heard Ed May, others talk about the photos themselves, and how important, one, the photos need to be, for judging, they need to be different, but that each photo has a certain luminosity, which is the excitement of the photo itself, what draws one's attention, and also maybe how clear it is, how many pixels. So luminosity and entropy, how much change within the photo. So you could think of it like we've learned for many years to focus in on the micro part of the overall ARV trial. But we're not looking at the judging phase itself. So think of the judging phase as parallel with what were our considerations of the photos. We have to bring that same consideration to the macro process, and say, if instead of comparing two photos, we're comparing two phases. We're comparing the judging photo set phase and the target feedback photo phase. And as you can see here, I made this like really tiny. The feedback is usually off further in the future. So that's already a problem, is that we sometimes just can't know the future until it happens, whatever the event is. And so we've got it so far off, and it's a lot smaller. So this would be analogous to if you had like a couple judging photos where, one is a naked person, female or male, our attention just goes to naked people. And then the other one would be like if it was a flower pot. We already know like to not have those unbalanced. But then what are we doing within the overall project phase? We're putting so much numinance or so much emphasis on this judging photo set phase. And then what's happening at feedback time? Let's talk about that a little bit. At feedback time, some people are barely glancing at their sessions, or maybe you've been with Marty for a long time, and so he's impressed on you that you need to create your feedback as a feedback session, as a period of time where you really focus on your feedback. You draw the picture, you spend time engaging with it. But here's what I also realized intuitively, is that the project manager and the judges are not very involved with the feedback most of the time. If you compare the amount of time, and so let's move to even maybe independent judging. Still, you've got so much attention on these phases, the judging photo set phase and the prediction phase. There's time spent, there's discussions, there's even if they're not communicating back and forth with the viewers, But then when it's time for feedback, they find out if it, and usually if it was a hit, they're a little bit more excited and they spend a little bit more time with it. But a lot of managers, like, where are they when the viewer is getting their feedback? They're on to the next thing. Or if it didn't turn out so well, they're not even wanting to think about it. They just do their job, they send the photo off, and that's it. And so what I've intuitively got was that there has to be a lot more meditation, a lot more consideration and thought forms and emotions from the project manager at the time of feedback on that feedback photo. So again, getting back to the process that I'm talking about that we're doing as viewers, you know, what steps can the project manager do? Now, I only have a couple suggestions, but this is something to think about more. Like, project managers, why don't you take that feedback photo and you print it out, or you even put it in space, somewhere in space and time for your viewers? I got this idea when I was on a project that was being led by Stanley Krippner and a couple other people. And initially this, I'm sorry for this very distracting, I keep seeing this shark that's distracting me here, so sorry about that. But I was on a Stanley Krippner project, and he wanted us to describe a photo in an envelope. And he was putting the envelope on a table at a particular house in Northern California. And when he told me about this whole setup, I was like, this is very strange. And why do we need to do all that stuff? Like, I don't need to send myself over to a house in Northern California, go up the stairs. Like he said, it's in a little room upstairs on a table, nothing else in it. There's an envelope. I want you to describe what's in that envelope. So when I first heard that, like I tend to do when someone gives me a new project with protocols that are different than I'm used to, I'm always like thinking, okay, well, what's good about this or not? So I was like, do we really need to do all that? But he said, yes, you do. And I have to say, I had really good results with that. I think out of 26 trials there, I had 19 correct. Now, his project, unfortunately, has not been written up yet. Been trying to get more information about if it will be written up, but he had about 20 viewers on that. And I don't know how the whole results went, but that was one of the things also that taught me about separating out in time and space. So having a particular place. So project managers, you can do something like this, or at the very least, if you're going to simply email your feedback photo, don't email it in the exact same way that you would email your judging photos. So whatever you could come up with. And here's, let me go to this slide here. Okay, so this was, oops, we have a little bit of echo there. Okay, so this is more of the ideal picture. And again, I have a lot of distractions going on. I mean, I like the pretty colors, but normally I wouldn't be showing slides with all this noise and brightness, but this is what we're dealing with. When we are remote viewing, think of these like sparkly, bubbly things all over. This is our world. Even if we're in a totally white room with nothing there but a white table, white walls, even if we're inside a Faraday cage, that might be nice. I don't know about you, but I don't have one of those in my house. Most of us don't. But even if we're in the best circumstances, another thing that I've gotten from different intuitive insights is that our lives are crowded and noisy and messy, and some of our lives are very much like that. And what I mean is, even if your immediate surrounding is pristine and clear, the amount of people you know, the amount of projects you're involved in, the amount of work and telephone conversations and emails and all your social media stuff, that's all existing on an energy level all around. Plus, all the millions of people. Some of you may have remote viewed outer space or look back on the Earth. If you've ever looked back on the Earth in a out-of-body experience or remote viewing experience, one thing you might notice is the noise. It is very, very noisy the earth is very noisy. And so we have all that going on. So it's a miracle that we can remote view what we want to remote view and reach the target. But what I've done here is shown a model, and I really want you to get this in your heads. This is the model of what exists is what you're doing at the remote viewing time, and then making the feedback session so big. But you can't just trust that you're going to reach it. And that's why, again, if I only watered this presentation down into a 5-minute talk, it would have been, what are you doing at the moment you sit down to remote view? And taking those 2 extra minutes to really get it in your mind, like I'm spatially going to the feedback photo, I'm touching where it's going to be physically, I'm anchoring in. If nothing else, that will help. And then the other thing is, we have got to find a way to decrease that excitement, that happiness, that I can't wait to see my judging photos. Now, of course, we would much rather just see the feedback photo, but that is delayed gratification. And as you know, with anything, you want to be in great shape, well, you have to exercise first, or you have to go on that diet first and put the cookies away. But so much in life, you wish you could reach that end goal, but there's a lot you have to do first. And some of that stuff you have to do first is the stuff you don't want to do. So we have to find a way to change our reactions. And this is where I suggest, and this is a little controversial, but getting very down on the judging phase. Again, not before I was down on it and I wanted to just avoid it. No, but if I have to do it, fine. But I need to go in with trepidation. When I'm going to look at those photos, let me pull those here up again. When these come up, now for me, the cheesecake, I do look at with trepidation, always trying to lose some weight. For some of you happily married people, you might feel the trepidation when you see the other picture here. No, I'm not supposed to be looking at this or getting excited by it. So what do we do here? Well, I'm not advocating this exactly, but some of you may be familiar with certain meditation practices, such as I knew a guy who was a Buddhist monk in Japan for 5 years, an American guy who went over there, but he joined this monastery, and their practice, because they were supposed to be celibate, and they're all young budding men, so their practice was to sit there and meditate on women's bodies being dissected. So they had to think, not that the women were being hurt, but like that the bodies were decaying, that they were like being pulled apart, that they looked terrible and smelled and felt terrible. So they would do this for hours. Now, I do not like that practice at all. I'm not advocating that. But that is along the lines of, can we look at the judging phase before we go into it? And again, this may take a little bit of like, don't just jump into the judging phase. Think about it like, wow, I'm entering into dangerous territory here. If I feel any excitement about seeing these photos, I need to take a step back and know that this is where I'm going to screw up here. And I'm not only going to screw up for myself, but I'm going to screw up the whole process if I get excited about this. This is very dangerous territory here. And however that's why let me just go back to this here. That's why I put these pictures: danger, stay away, a shark, a skull and crossbones. Like these are the pictures I insert into my mind when I know self-judging is involved. And at the same time, I'm meditating on my excited, wonderful feelings about my delayed gratification. The other thing is, going back to what can project managers do, look how I made these photos very tiny. So it may be that when you deliver your feedback, when you deliver the judging sets, make those small. Now, some people might say, well, if they're small, you're not going to be able to adequately compare your session to them. you know, that's a valid critique. But again, maybe you can make them as small as possible while you can still take a look at them. Whatever you need to do to de-emphasize the excitement, or maybe even like make them slightly different than the feedback photo itself. Again, some people are going to stand up and say, oh, or, you know, if you're going to screw with those or make them too different, you know, it might be hard for us to judge these. But, or here's another idea. Do the trick that I did here. If you're, let's say you're doing a series of 20 trials with your viewers, know that there's going to be like at least 5 in there that are not, the judging sets have nothing to do with the feedback photos. So you can do that as well. And then maybe for that, you just self-judge yourself. Or let the viewers know that they're not always going to be having anything to do with the feedback photo at all. So and in psychology terms, in behavioral terms, that would be called intermittent conditioning. So they don't get the reward. You're trying to break down, not even, you're trying to take away the sense of the reward at all. But if there is any feeling of reward, then you take that away, because they know that sometimes the judging set isn't going to have anything to do with the feedback. Okay, then I think we're getting close to the time. Let me just see one more. Okay, I think I've pretty much made the point. Does anyone have any questions before we go to our feedback? And if so, just go ahead and unmute yourself and speak up. And Marty, do you see any questions or anything at all?
No, I think everybody is fine. I certainly understand your approach and what you're saying. So yeah, they tend to be shy.
Okay, no problem. I'm usually the one that like asks the questions and speaks up at these, but since I'm presenting, I kind of can't do both. So, okay, we're gonna now do the feedback. Okay, just gotta find my harmonica. You know, it's the simple things in life, finding your harmonica, remembering to plug in your computer. It can really screw you up here. Okay, so let me just take this down here so I can see what's happening. All right, now what we're gonna do is I'll play the tone, and then I'm gonna walk you over to the computer, and let me see if I can print out. I'm gonna take away this judging set. We don't need those extra distractions. And now, let me find. Okay, sorry guys, just give me 1 second here. Okay, so before I even show this, don't look at my, don't look at the, oh wait, how do I do this? Let me take this. I didn't expect to have all this stuff open. Okay, sorry about that. Let's just walk over to my printer right now. Here, we'll do this. I'm gonna just, instead of printing it, oops. Okay, I'm gonna walk over to my printer and all right, I'm changing my mind here. Let me just show this to you. Okay, just because I have other stuff on my screen that's just going to be distracting. Okay, so I'm going to play the tone. This is the feedback photo, and then you can also see me. Okay, so that's the tone. And then you can see the feedback photo on my screen, but then I'd also like you to watch while I print it out, and just going to make a copy so you can see it coming out. And I don't know if I'm aiming the camera right here. Here's my printer. Okay, so we're watching. Just look at my printer right now, even though there's a picture up on my screen. And there it comes out. See, this is exciting. We get to see something coming out. It's almost like money coming out of a slot machine. And here it's coming out, and it's upside down, but okay, there it is. So this is the moment of feedback. This is where your past self meets your future self, with me holding up the feedback photo. And so you saw it coming out of the computer. I'm now holding it up. Yay, you guys did such a great job. This is very exciting. So now you can go ahead and just compare your session to what you see here. And then in the chat box, just why don't you give a score for how, or just make a comment about how well you think you did. Okay, and then we'll just take a look in the chat box here. Okay. Obviously, I need to do a little prep work with my computer before I speak at another webinar. All right, but let's go to now the chat box. Okay, and I would love to hear from someone. Would anyone like to comment about how they're feeling, or what they, if they felt that they did a good job? It looks like Brent, you're happy with the results. Do you want to tell us about that? We'll hear from a few people.
Hi guys, Brent here. It's kind of neat. I was actually more attached to the cheesecake. For my drawing really pulls up the cheesecake. So got more practice here on my end.
Okay. And the past me would, wanting to be supportive of you as a remote viewer, would have said, oh, well, you know, that's great. But the needing to be stern me is just going to say, nope, not good. Okay. Anybody else for this one? Does anyone else feel that you did a good job describing this? And anybody else?
Yeah, I had a lot of good descriptors for this. I guess, are you going to describe, maybe I just missed it, on how we connect the prediction to this? Because, I mean, this is almost like straight, to me, this seems almost like straight remote viewing of the feedback target. I'm not really sure how the judging works into it for a prediction.
Okay, very good question. So yes, this is just a straight, you have a target, you're describing it. So I didn't set it up as a ARV trial where the photos matched a potential outcome of an event. I didn't do that at all. This was just straight remote viewing. But the judging set comes in because many times in parapsychology projects, it's set up where after the viewer turns in their session, either the viewers are required to self-judge between to choose the photo that they were describing out of a set of photos. And that's what I was saying, that's the standard procedure for most parapsychology experiments. So they'll say, okay, you do your session, and then I'm going to give you a set of photos, and I want you to tell me which is the best match. That set of photos has no meaning. If you're not doing associative remote viewing, those other photos aren't attached to anything. They're just put in a way so that statisticians can then say, oh, well, for this trial, you correctly chose your photo. And so we're going to give you one that's going to count as one hit or one accomplishment. And then they go on to the next one. So if you do 100 of those, they could then say out of 100 trials, you or the independent judge was able to select the feedback photo from a set of several photos, this many times, more than chance. So they're essentially, most of these projects are doing what I consider, and many other viewers or researchers, but they're doing what we consider putting noise into the project. Courtney Brown, he has a really good book, his latest book, and I forget the name of it, but if you just look up books by Courtney Brown, he talks a lot about this subject, and he's not just talking about associative remote viewing, it's this other design. And in fact, I and some of people here, I know we're just part, I know John Allen, if you're still here, you were part of an experiment where we were just required to choose between two photos. Which photo is it the one that you were describing? And for those, they were just very abstract targets, just little scribbles that were very similar to each other. So basically we had to come up with, one shape within the abstract shape that would be different from the other ones. And for that one, out of 8, we were supposed to do 10, I missed 2. So I got 6 correct out of 8. Not too bad from doing this exact approach that I'm sharing with you guys. So again, that wasn't associative remote viewing, but these managers or these researchers, the problem in research is that everything is based on what happened before. So I've tried to run some projects in the last couple of years where I didn't include judging sets, because again, my attitude is if it's not associative remote viewing, why enter this extra noise into it? Why not just judge every session on its own merit? And Alexis Poquist, who many of you know, he runs the big RV Facebook group and he's been a member of APP for years. He came up with the dung beetle system. And it's a system of scoring that's a bit more fine-tuned than the TARG or SRI scale. And that can be used in a way where you don't have to use judging sets to evaluate how good a viewer did. You simply add up perceptions. This perception, this sketch is a match, this is correct, this is not correct within the session itself, and then you could give it a score. 90% of the perceptions were correct within the session. That's really good. But when you hand that over to a lot of parapsychologists or statisticians, they're kind of like, yeah, but I'm used to the matching tasks. Our stats are set up to do the matching end of things, not to do it like where you just evaluate the session on its own merit. So they're really stuck to this matching game. And hopefully with time, one of my agendas is to try to move that over and come up with new ways to evaluate remote viewing sessions. And quite frankly, I'm just tired of the quantitative evaluation. I'm really now personally getting into the qualitative, what happened during the session, what perceptions were right, why were they right, why did the person get more color than they got, shapes or what's all involved in that. So that's the qualitative approach that I would like to move forward, but you're going to find very little qualitative analysis within any of the published literature at this time. So what we're doing here, I really feel like within the Applied Precognition Project, the work that Marty's doing, the work that you guys are doing, and us coming together and just having talks like this, where we really have our fingers on the pulse of this work. And I'll just end right here in a minute and then we'll take questions. But in psychology, they have all these big conferences now that are about consciousness and understanding consciousness and all these theories and, endless theories. But what I really come back to is if people want to understand consciousness, they should be right here. They should be doing remote viewing sessions, and not just one remote viewing session, but they should be doing hundreds of remote viewing sessions and joining in with groups like this. Until you do this stuff yourself, I can't think of anything else. Maybe hypnosis. Hypnosis is a close second for sure. But this is what is going to teach us about our own being conscious, being unconscious, what's all involved in that, and all of the world. And I believe even all of physics, so much is going to be known through the work we're doing here. And that's why it's important for us to keep talking. And maybe we can then teach these researchers, parapsychologists, psychologists something. The other thing I'll add is, I've been the last year and a half, I've been studying the Ingo Swann archives that are located at my University of West Georgia, and I go there once a week and spend about 4 hours in his archives. And from that, one of the things that I really became aware of is that the people that were at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, and that worked with Swann and all the other military remote viewers, many of whom you guys and myself have trained with, these researchers were brilliant people. Russell Targ, Ed May, even people, Marty's a physicist. So the thing is, they were all physicists. And Marty, probably more than anybody, is getting more into the psychological aspects of this work. Your feelings about money, feelings about, that's been a theory there. That your feelings about money can attract you to doing well or not. There's a lot to be further tested here. But the physicists were looking at certain aspects of this work that, yes, were important. But I really think that when you read Ingo's work, he was the one that was getting into the psychological details of, what is it that can help us get over our errors in our remote viewing sessions. Why are we sometimes correct, but sometimes we're getting really off base? And and I read something recently where he said, what we're learning here about remote viewing is going to it's going to revolutionize psychology. That's what he said. And unfortunately, he was naive in that, because most psychologists are not paying attention to these things like we are, having these discussions. So it's up to us in this room right now to spread what we know, not to bombard people or, bother them or be irritating, but just to continue, spreading our work with as many people as we can, and just continuing to do it. That's the other thing that I really want to impress. In one document that I read between Ingo and Hal Puthoff, Hal acknowledged that in the single course of a year, Ingo had done 19,000 sessions in a single year. 19,000. Now, these were not just regular remote viewing sessions. A lot of these were forced choice trials, so they were very quick. He could do hundreds, sometimes even in a week. But imagine that many thousands of trials within a year. Now, they both acknowledged that it was too much and it really took a toll on him, how much work he was doing. But if you compare how much work you're doing to that, not again to, be negative or stress you out or, we can go overboard with this stuff, but it's really about doing the work. And I think this is important because people look at, Ingo or Joe McMoneagle or some other viewers and say, wow, that person is so talented. They're so gifted. Well, yes, they are, but they're more talented and gifted in that they had the discipline to push themselves to practice. And it's just a lie that Ingo didn't have to practice. He practiced and worked with 12 different research institutes. And before he even got to Stanford Research Institute, he was already working with so many others. And the thing again was trial after trial, he had a lot of misses. He had a lot of hits and he did very well, but he had a ton of misses as he was practicing. So he was not much different than you guys are. All right, that's all I have to say. Does anybody want to, I'd love to open it up for discussion in our last few minutes here. So let's hear some comments, questions.
Thank you, Deborah. Yes, please. You know how to turn on your mic? Go for it.
Okay, heard one person starting to talk.
Can you hear me? This is Millie. I have a question.
Yes. Hi, Millie.
Okay. So you were talking about reward, or kind of like that connection to the end result of the photo. So my question is, what if you didn't put your name on the session on the right-hand side, and then you could say that wasn't me? You know, you can't connect yourself with the end result of the session. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? So that you can't identify that you did that session. So sometimes I don't put my name on the session on the top right-hand corner, like on purpose. If that, do you understand my question?
Now explain that a little bit more. I don't quite understand.
Okay, so it's basically not identifying with the end result. Like if you do a good session and I don't have my name on it, I could say I'd have no connection to it, whether it was a good or bad session. So it was more of like the reward that maybe you touched on a little bit, or that connection to the end result, which was like you feel like you're rewarded if you did a good job. But for me, I don't like to put my name on it, because if I do a good job, it's more like adds to like the ego maybe, and I want to refrain from that.
Yeah, that's totally fine and valid, and there are lots of viewers that don't want to use their own name. They might use, and this is probably for a discussion about anything related to remote viewing, not just associative remote viewing. But yeah, there's no reason you should feel like you need to use your name, or that there's anything wrong if you don't. You might come up with a code name though, or maybe switch it up. So sometimes if you're working with a group, the manager, or just for people to keep track of what you're doing, it's helpful for them to have an identifier for you. So you might come up with an identifier for a particular project, and then if you don't want to become known, because like sometimes people become known by their identifier, so you could switch it up a lot as well. You know, that I don't think that's a big deal at all. And the only reason I said for our demonstration, I said put your name at the top on the right, is because I know a lot of people here have been trained in different CRV derivative methodologies, and so, or CRV methodologies or derivatives, and we start to kind of program ourselves to go into a session as soon as we put our name at the top of the session there in that place. It's almost like a subconscious cue to get into a rhythm of what that will set us up. So every time we do that, our subconscious gets us right to where we want to go faster. Kind of like at the start of this, some of you, excuse me, some of you weren't here initially, but I was saying how before I do a webinar, I like to put on my socks, kind of like Mr. Rogers likes to put on his sweater, and Marty said that he likes rituals and things like that. And that's exactly why when we do the same thing each time as a remote viewer, it's just helping us get into the session more. Did that answer your question, or was there another part to your question, Millie?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. And who else would like to speak up?
Brent here. A question for you. We didn't use coordinates this time. Why was that, please?
Okay, so here's the thing with coordinates, and you know, people have different ideas. You're going to sometimes have managers that give you coordinates that you're used to, but if you work with a lot of different managers and researchers, they're going to have their own system. And so you can always give yourself a coordinate. And again, this is about you taking control of your session. So I might just call, like for me, I was just considering this to be the feedback photo for the webinar that's taking place on March 5th. And if I go back to my screen, see if I can. Okay, so here's my screen. March 5th webinar. I just called it photo for ARV webinar March 5th. Now, one thing I've been doing, just because I came off recently of for a dream ARV project where we were dreaming the photo we were going to see the next day. I was both the researcher on it, and then in the experimental phase, I served as the dreamer, and Marty was also a dreamer on that as well. And so we decided in setting that project up that our target number would be the date at which we were receiving our feedback. So if the feedback was going to be tomorrow, the target number would be 5/5/2018. And it was good knowing that that's how the target number was, because we didn't have to wait for our manager to send us some tasking. We could just set it up that we were going to dream when we wanted to dream, and we knew the number. But I've been on lots of projects where they were like, okay, this is trial number 1. So I could just say trial number 1 and use that as my feedback, as my target number. Or I might say, you know what, I have 3 other projects going with trial number 1s. So I'm going to create a number for myself. And again, maybe I'm going to choose the date when I'm going to get my feedback, or maybe it's going to be random. So there's always what you're given and what you give yourself. And then one of the problems here is that, you know, as new students, we learn from someone, and that person has a certain approach and a certain reason for doing things. For example, you may have heard that it's helpful to have a target number that's 8 digits long, because that's a comfortable number, or maybe it's 1 digit more than the telephone numbers, which are easy to remember. So there may be some valid reasons why they say this is how a target number is set up. But what I'm really trying to do here is say, you know, outside of your training or the nice little boxes you learned in, we're in a big messy world with lots of people doing different things. And it's not that these researchers, you know, that some are very accomplished researchers, and they have reasons for setting up what they do. Sometimes they're just not aware of what might make things easier. So we can always decide, okay, within the parameters that I have to work, how am I going to set things up for myself as a viewer, back to taking control as a viewer. And that way we don't have to get all freaked out because people are doing things, oh, she didn't give me a target number, you know, oh, she's doing this over here or that. That being said, again, I want to apologize. Like right now I have all these documents, all this messy stuff on my desktop. That's just noise. And it's not really fair for me as a manager or teacher or researcher to say, hey, that shouldn't matter, get over that. You know, there's certain things that can be taken care of. And if you encounter someone that's just doing sloppy things, like it's time to send you your feedback photo and they send you a bunch of other emails, or they send you a bunch of pictures in the same email where you're supposed to get your feedback photo, that's screwing with you, and it's not cool. And you either need to tell them stop it, and you know, if they don't think it's a big deal, then you don't want to work with them in the future. Okay, a little sidetrack there from your question, but Brett, did you have any other questions, or did that?
That's fabulous. Thank you very much, because we've been learning it's all a matter of intention anyways. So I really like your explanation about, you know, working with what we've got and being open to new possibilities and new methods of performing our remote viewing. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Hey, Debra, can you hear me? Hi, this is John Knowles. Yeah, I'd like to contribute something too. And what triggered it was your mentioning about dreaming and dream groups, and also the fact that you have a third photo here. You gave us 2 photos, and then you gave us a third photo. I'm going to post in the message section my dream that I had about how to remote view better.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
And it was the only dream I've ever had about how to improve ARV, and it was very forceful. I actually haven't explored it much, but I put the dream in there because it involves having a third target, which is different from the 2 photos. It advises, the dream did, to make sure that your feedback target, your feedback photo, corresponds to your session. You can see it there in the box. So in case anybody wants to explore something else, there's something else to look at.
Can you just tell us why don't you just read it to us? Or
okay.
No, I'm not seeing it, right.
Okay, it says, Can people see it now in the box there? Whoops.
Well, we have time. We'd love to hear.
Okay, here we go. I'll read it from my screen. My dream from spring 2012. A, tasker assigns a target associated with an outcome of a game. For example, the winning team of an NFL game. B, viewer does the session. And this is all in the dream very clearly. C, viewer is shown the target and scores his or her session based on the closeness to the target. So that's standard so far. D, a bet is made or is not made based on how high the score is. For example, a target score of 3.5. That's standard. E, target event takes place. F, this is the step that's new. For feedback, a second target is chosen, one that definitely matches the viewer's session. And my question is, because the dream wasn't clear, chosen by the viewer, the targeter, or the analyst, and that's it.
So then, and then just give us your interpretation of the endpoint. So what would you say the difference is, or the main point?
Well, it's like you're going to have to choose a photo that matches your session. So you have to go online and do that. So I sort of played around with that a little bit, but I haven't really devoted much time to it. But that dream was so emphatic, and I've never had another dream like it that was like 6 years ago. So I need to explore that.
Is that before you do feedback, John?
No, for feedback, a second target is chosen, one that definitely matches the viewer's session.
I understand that, but what about the real, so you never give real feedback?
That is your real feedback, but it's weird, and I don't quite understand it.
But if you wager on which team, okay, you do that based on the regular judging.
Right.
And then you always have the viewer feel really good because either he or somebody else has given him a good match. That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if it corresponds to what you were suggesting, Debra, in any way, but it is a different feedback photo than the two judging photos that you have.
That sounds a little bit like the process that Marty was trying out for a while, like with the wild cards.
Right, the one ARV. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we tried that. Right, we all worked together on that for quite a while. This is different, though.
Yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit more.
We can talk more about it in May, right?
Yeah, and maybe I think that'd be really cool if you could maybe even run like a series of 10, just a series that I'm sure, some people here would be willing to see what happens with that.
Good idea. Maybe I'll try that. Yeah.
That would be great. That's what we need to just try things, even if we have no idea if they're going to work out or not. Here's one thing, and then I'd like to take a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up. But one thing I wanted to point out here, and this isn't quite exact. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Okay, so with the dream project that I was talking about, one thing that came up, and I want to show you this chart. I just fixed it. Where is that? Okay, here. One of the things I wanted to do was assess when someone's gotten a CR score. So we had our dream, we produced a transcript, and we were dreaming the feedback photo and producing a transcript that would be similar to if we were just remote viewing it. So one's unconscious and one's conscious, but you wake up and you record what pictures did I see in my mind, or during the dream, what images did I get, and what do I want to say about it? So you produce a transcript and then it's judged. And we use the 0 to 7 scale. And so I wanted to know, well, how many times when an individual viewer had let's say they got a 4, a score of a 4, which for the 7-point scale, a 4 usually we think of as like it's pretty good, like there's some correct information, some incorrect, a mixture of it. Typically in the app groups, we've had a general rule, and when I say we, it's kind of over time, different project managers getting together, and it seemed like a while ago it was decided by kind of collectively that if a viewer's transcript was judged at like 3.5 or 4, that should be taken into consideration, and a prediction could be made, providing that the score was, there was a wide enough score between the two photos as far as judging photos. So now, for those of you that are new, I'm changing my discussion here, not what so much remote viewers are doing, but what's happening during the scoring phase and how to make predictions. And so we thought, well, a score of 4, 3.5 or even 4, like it's not like the best, but you know, it's okay. So I wanted to know, well, is a score of 4 really okay or not? So I went through just last night our spreadsheet, and I recorded every time a viewer had received the score of a 4 or 4.5 or 5, and I divided these up. And so on this graph here, hopefully you can see my screen, I have how many times for a hit did a session receive, say, a 5. So for a score of a 5, out of say 300 remote viewing sessions over the course of a year, there were 41 times that a viewer received a 5, which on a 7-point scale, that's pretty good. And that 41 times the 5s resulted in hits, but then 29 times they still resulted in misses. That's kind of a high number for 29 remote viewing sessions to have scored a 5, and they ended up resulting in trials that were misses. Now, we can't say for sure why that is. Did it have to do with displacement, the viewer doing a good job describing the wrong target? Did it have to do because our judge was too permissive and should not have given some of those sessions? They really didn't deserve a 5, and I think that happens a lot too. But you could see here, even like 5.5s or 5.75s, which I think personally judges don't need to get into, you know, dividing up scores that in minute detail like that. That's a subject for another day. We could spend a whole webinar on discussing scoring, which I actually think would be a good idea. We can maybe do that another time. But with, you could see 10 of the 5.5s or 5.75s, the sessions that received those scores resulted in misses, and 11 resulted in hits. When you get into the 6s, 9 of them, let's say 6 or 6.5, 10 resulted in hits and only 2 resulted in misses. So how would I sum this up? What I would suggest is, if we really want to make sure we're avoiding misses in ARV trials, we might even want to make predictions only if the viewer's sessions are getting a 6 or higher, which would mean a lot more passes. So again, this is, because I'm here and I just started to look at this, I thought I would share this. We're going off into another topic here, but something I think needs further discussion as well. Okay. Marty?
Very interesting, Deborah. Let me make a comment going back to your main theme, because I was struck by the way you basically said, when you go into a judging session, danger, danger, danger. And I think that was right, exactly. And I think that's good, and may very well serve to put some sort of shield around it so that the remote viewer won't go there. It'll avoid danger, danger, danger. So that was, I try to get a takeaway, and I think that was an important and valuable takeaway. You know, we've always told people to stay intellectual. That's as far as I've got, the no emotions and all of that. But I think this is a valuable addition. And when I remote view, I'm going to use it. And, you know, again, we'll see, you know, but I think if other people use it, and hopefully their hit rates will go up.
Yeah, and you know what you said is very interesting, because you can tell a person to not have emotion, but you can't make them not. You know, we have emotions, we have what
Right.
we want at that time. We have, and you know, I presented something somewhat similar a couple years ago, and kind of the opposite of excitement is also relief. You know, when we're doing a remote viewing session, there's tension building up. Not always. Sometimes we're in that zone and we just feel great. But a lot of times, you know, that there's so much tied up with our performance. And you know, there's different ways to get control of it. But like, whether you're a new viewer or you've been doing this stuff for a long time, you know, just when you're feeling like confident in everything, either you have a string of not so good sessions, or the stakes get higher. You get invited to be on a project with someone you respect. There's suddenly money involved there, or it seems for some reason that this time more than others, maybe you're in front of cameras, this time more than others, I have to do a good job. Or I'm working with these new people and I don't quite trust them. I don't know, are they going to look at my session, think it's really bad, and tell everybody that I'm not a good viewer? So it doesn't matter if I've had, you know, 10 years of a great track record. It almost feels like at any moment my reputation could be shattered. And this is a real reason why, you know, and valid, because there are people out there that also, you know, are not just skeptics, but they're really hostile, and they will try to do things like that. I have to say, though, I haven't encountered too many personally, thankfully. But this is also why you need to be careful who you work with. But my point here, and I don't mean to suddenly put everyone into, you know, intense anxiety, but I'm speaking to what's already there, and, you know, learning how to manage that through meditation, through, you know, that's another webinar for another subject. How do we deal with this anxiety? But it's there. And so when we are about to get our judging set, which again, we would love to just get our feedback session, but you know, it's kind of like we're going for a drug. The drug is going to give us the relief to whether we know, we're going to find out if we did a good job or a bad job. We're at least going to know, and that knowing creates that not knowing, being in that, how did this turn out? What was going on here? That's a very precarious and scary place to be, is not knowing. So we're going for the drug of what will give us relief one way or another. And that judging set provides that simple fix before we could get the ultimate fix. And this, I really believe that this is part of so many people's inward, unconscious, sometimes we're conscious, sometimes not. But if we continue to ignore these feelings inside ourselves, you know, we're and both ourselves as viewers, but also as judges. You know, the judges are managers. Maybe they are kind of in a more intellectual state, but the other part of the emotion for the judge is, oh, if this turned out in a hit, great, I'm so happy. But if it didn't, oh gosh, that was painful and uncomfortable, and let me just move on to the next trial and not think about this. And then they're ignoring what they're doing during the feedback session, which, if we are to believe in retrocausal effect, you know, the manager's just trying to run away onto the next trial or getting real busy with other stuff is going to create a problem as well. All right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah. And then we'll let Debra go. One more final one here. Okay. Debra, thank you very much. This was very valuable, and and of course I appreciate maybe more than most, because you and I have talked so much about independent versus self-judging. and realize in app, we do have most of the people are still doing self-judging. And I think this idea of somehow blocking the judging session, danger, danger, reduces all the entanglements from remote viewing time, and then you jump right to the feedback time. That was very beautiful insight.
Well, and
Okay.
I just want to say thank you to Marty, because really, you know, all of this is just building on what you've been teaching people for years and years. And that's what I love about us being able to come together. And also, you know, I know you've seen this with yourself, and I'm seeing it as, you know, we'll go through, and John, who's been, John Knowles, who spoke up with his dream, who's been doing this forever. You know, I think we all see where we go through phases where we're pretty sure we understand something, or we, you know, we feel strongly about something, and then we can see it unravel a little bit and then adopt a new approach. So, you know, just giving each other permission to learn and grow and change our insights about these things and come back together is really pretty cool. So thank you, and to John and to everyone else who, you know, is hanging in there with this subject.
Very good, Debra. Thank you.
Sure. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
We'll end this now, and I will put the recording out. So take care.
Bye.
Bye. Let's see. In fact, you may have to end it, you being the host.
Okay. Let me see. All right. Bye, everyone.